This is a Porsche 992 Turbo S. Now, the 992 Turbo S is a pretty potent tool from factory. They've made a big upgrade over the 991 with this car. Ultimately, Porsche claimed this car to be 650 horsepower from factory. That doesn't mean that they haven't left plenty on the table for us to be able to achieve when we start to upgrade the car. Now, in the case of this one, we're going to install a set of our 992 Genome Design sports cats. That will mean that it's still road legal and will still pass a UK MOT, so the car can be used on the road. We're going to do a drop-in BMC panel filter at the same time, and then we're going to do a Stage 1 Plus ECU and gearbox calibration. Now, the reason why we're not going to Stage 2, aside from the cost implications, is it does require quite a lot more hardware. We'd need to install intercooler, we'd need race manifolds, potentially look to do decats, which again makes the car for off-road use only. And we'd also need to upgrade the exhaust system. Now, we're hoping to achieve with just our sports cats and drop-in panel filters and then our calibration, somewhere between 750 and 800 horsepower, which is a massive jump over standard. If we then choose to take the car a little bit further, we can install all the additional hardware, and there'd only be a light modification required to the software that would then produce in excess of 800 horsepower. So the next step from here is to head on down to Genome HQ. We'll get the car on the dyno, we'll get some initial data logs with the car in standard form, make sure everything's healthy and as it should be, and then we'll go ahead and start the tuning process. So you've now seen the guys fit the Genome Design sports cats to the car and load it up onto the dyno. We've had a little bit of a clip to see the before and after at static for the noise test. Obviously on the dyno, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to run it up pre-sports cats, but you're certainly going to hear the difference. Now's probably a good time for me to get a shameless plug in for a like and subscribe for the channel prior to getting to the end of the video and then asking there. So it does make a big difference if people can like, subscribe, share, all that sort of stuff. It gives us the opportunity to do more of this sort of thing. With that in mind, we're now going to run the car up stock, get some data logs which will jump to my laptop and we'll go through the data logs together. I will then build a base file for the lads to run up. We'll run that again, get some more logs, go through the graphs together so that you can completely understand and see exactly what it is that we're doing to this car. Now that we've seen the car run up standard on the dyno, we've got the stock figures behind me. Now bear in mind that this has got some additional hardware in the way of our sports cats and a BMC filter. So as expected, it's made a little bit more power than what's quoted from factory. So we've got 575 foot-pounds of torque and 600 wheel horsepower. That's around 20 horsepower more than what we expected to see from a stock car. So that would suggest that the car is making right around 670 horsepower. Given the fact that it's got the hardware, we're not surprised by that at all. So what we do need to do now is jump across to my laptop where we'll talk about the data logs, understand where we can improve, what we can do, what the ignition timing is the throttle open, all that sort of good stuff. If that's a little bit tedious and boring for you, we'll drop a point into the video where you can just skip that and see us flash the base file that I'm going to build and then retest. So the plan moving forwards from here will be to check the logs. If everything's happy, I'll build a base file, send it across to the guys, they will flash that on, get me some data logs, and then from that point I can make a judgment call on whether I'm going to turn it up, down, or leave it where it is.
Okay, so we are now going to take a look at the stock logs. As you can probably see by my computer screen here, I've got an awful lot of data channels that I need to look at. I'm going to run through the basics because I don't want to go too deep into it. I say this on every video. If people want to see really deep data logs and understanding WYNOs and all that, first of all, this is not the video for that. It'd take us forever. And secondly, if you do want to see that sort of stuff, just comment so that we know that it's something that everybody wants to understand and see more of, and I will happily put a video together going a little bit more in depth on certain models and things like that. So the basics that I need to see, first of all from stock, is what boost pressure are we making, how's the throttle control working, how does the logic work for the boost control, how does the ignition timing advance work, all that sort of stuff, and also to see whether there's anything that's at a bit of a loss before we even get going. So we've got the absolute throttle position, so we can see that it ramps the throttle in slowly. So you would find, if I find accelerator pedal position, you can actually see that the pedal position is at 100%, and it allows the throttle to ramp in slowly there. Now, in some cases on the stock Porsche files you find dips and all sorts of stuff. In this case actually it's pretty good. Now don't be thrown off by the fact that we've got 100% accelerator pedal position and then only 85% throttle position. It's because of the way it's set up in the stock file, and we will continue to use it like that. So at 85% throttle body position, if you like, we're actually happy that that is 100%, so to speak. We wouldn't want any more than that. You can adjust it up, but there's no need to. So we're happy that the throttle position looks good. Most importantly on the stock file is to see if we're pulling any ignition timing out, which we are. Again, some of these are quite big, which on the dyno it's really difficult. I mean, I would usually say anything over 3 degrees of ignition pull I'd start to look at. Up to 4, then we'd really start to think, right, okay, we need to back this off a little bit. Now in this case on the Porsche file, we're actually seeing very, very quickly it spikes down to -5. You've got to bear in mind that the engine is in the back on this car, and whilst we've got extra cooling, it's quite difficult to keep them cool. What we'd probably find is if we ran that car on the road, it would be a lot less ignition pull than that, probably closer to 2 or 3 degrees. That can be fueling related, it can be heat related, it can be that it's picked something up that it thought was knock and actually it's not, it's just general mechanical noise. So we just need to keep an eye on that when we do our file, just to see where it is. I'm not necessarily worried about that because of course we know that Porsche aren't going to let it go out of the factory and it be unsafe. So anything above sort of 6 degrees on a tune file, we'd be starting to think that's too much and we need to back the ignition advance off. But in terms of that, we're quite happy. I'd like to see here as well where our peak ignition timing is. So as you can see here, this is the ignition advance. As it comes on boost, it reduces the amount of ignition because of the cylinder pressure. As it starts to sit steady on the boost there and come past its point of peak cylinder pressure, it'll start to advance the timing up towards the top there to give you the peak figures. Now we can see it's around 27 degrees of ignition advance. We're going to add a little bit to that when we do the base map. And then next we want to see commanded boost pressure versus actual boost pressure. Now this is pressure up throttle. We do have manifold pressure on here, but on this particular channel, if I can find it, it's in here somewhere. I know it is intake manifold pressure. So the intake manifold pressure, you can see there it says 255. We've got a bar of atmospheric pressure, so everything is 2 rather than 1. This sensor actually maxes out at 1.55 bar, so 255. That's why we would use the pressure up throttle sensor to get a more accurate figure. Now, strangely enough, the commanded intake manifold pressure, you can see there it shows what our commanded is, but as you can see, as soon as the actual manifold pressure hits 1.55 bar, it just maxes out, and I can guarantee it's definitely going higher than that, and I can tell you that because on the pressure up throttle, which is your boost pressure commanded value and boost pressure, which you can see there, we've got a commanded value of 2649, which is 1.65 bar. It's quite high for a stock file, which would, probably suggest why they make such good power and torque, because it is running quite a bit of boost from factory. Actually, on a 991 we would see a lot less than that. I'm sure it's like 1.3, 1.2 bar from factory. But anyway, the boost pressure isn't overshooting its target, so we've got no throttle closures, and then you can see it just slowly settles down to about 1.53 bar up the top there, and then right at the very top the boost drops down, as you would expect. Everything looks really good there. Fueling wise, again, I would usually look at, where are we? Commanded ratios. We've got commanded ratio there, and then we've got actual, which is here. So we can see that there's nothing untoward going on with the fueling as well. It's actually quite rich, to be fair, is that. It's adding quite a bit of fuel. So they're the basic things. There's obviously a lot more I need to look at and have looked at. From here, we'll jump across to WINOs. I usually have the file for stock and for the graph. I can usually see that I've got another screen over here that I reference the DYNO graph to see whereabouts in the rev range we are when something's happening, so as I can check that against the logs, and then we'll jump over into WINOs where we'll create the file. Now, I could go through all that with you as well. That would get very, very intense. Again, if you want to see more about the tuning stuff, there's a million YouTubers and whatnot out there showing how to do WINOs and stuff. It's not something that we need to do, but we will now create a base file. I'll aim for a little bit less boost pressure at the bottom end and then wind some boost in at the top. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm probably going to go up to 1.65 at the top instead of 1.5. So we're picking up about 100, 150 millibar higher up in the rev range. Add a little bit of ignition timing to start with, make some changes to the fueling, adjust a few bits on the throttle control, and then we'll see where that's at.
So as you can see, we have now tested the base file, which I've built and sent across to the guys. We've got some really fantastic results here. We've got just over 650 foot-pounds of torque, so we've got well in excess of 50 foot-pounds of extra torque at peak. It holds it all the way through, and we've got much more torque right across the rev range. We've also pretty much matched this torque figure by hitting 650 wheel horsepower. Now, again, given that we're on all 4 packs, the drivetrain losses are higher on this car than if we usually run them in rear wheel drive. Now, the reason that we've put it on all 4s is because it's making such a lot of torque, it would actually max the rear packs out if we just ran it on the rears only. So 650 wheel horsepower at the engine, using the same calculation as what we've done from stock to get our stock figures, is going to put this car somewhere between 730 and 740 horsepower. So I'm going to jump across now. We won't show going through the logs again because I think there's going to be a little bit more to come from it. So I'm going to jump across, have a quick look at my data logs, make sure I'm happy with that. But looking at this graph, and based on what I've seen when the guys have run the car up, I actually think that we can probably go a little bit more aggressive on this tune. I know full well that the customer is only going to be running Shell V-Power fuel in this car. So providing we don't have any masses of timing pull, and the boost pressure is set sensible at the moment, so if it's hit the target boost pressure that I want it to make, there is some headroom in it. So I'm going to go check that. If everything's as it should be, I will turn the car up and then we'll go through the logs when I've actually finished. The lads have now run the second version 2 file with a little bit more boost pressure and a slight increase in ignition timing, which I did suspect we might be able to do, but I'd always like to start a little bit lower and then increase incrementally rather than going full send and worrying that we might break something or having to pull it back. It's always better to start lower and work your way up. So what we've managed to achieve by increasing boost pressure by 100 millibars, so again, it's such a small amount, but it has such a great effect on these cars. There's a very small amount of boost pressure and a little bit more ignition timing. We've adjusted some fueling as well to allow us to run that without causing any problems. We've actually now hit 675 foot-pounds of torque, and we're just short of 700 wheel horsepower. I think if we'd not been running the car in the dyno cell all day and it was a very cold day, which hopefully we'll get in the morning, we might actually just clip 700 wheel horsepower. So as it stands there, that's 688 at the wheels, so that's pushing on for 780, 790 horsepower. Now, bear in mind that this car has only got sports cats and a panel filter. If we were to run with manifolds, an exhaust system, possibly an intercooler upgrade, I'm absolutely confident that this car would be pushing well over 800 horsepower. I'm going to assume it's absolutely bonkers to drive, but we're going to leave the car on the dyno overnight, come in early in the morning in the hope that we get a really nice cold dyno cell. We'll jump across to my laptop now, have a look at the logs, and then if we get the opportunity, we'll drop all the graphs and things, because I suspect it might just clip 700 wheel horsepower tomorrow. We'll drop those graphs into the product page. So within this description for this video, there will be a link to the product page. There'll be all the graphs from the different boost settings and stuff in there and all the information. So if you've got one of these cars, that's exactly what you want to be looking at. We'll take the car on the road, we'll see how it performs. I mean, it's a little bit greasy out there, we are still in winter. I expect it's going to want to set all 4 wheels up, but we'll see how we go. And then we'll touch base when we're done. Right then, so the final set of data logs, and hopefully I've not lost everybody and bored you all too much, but essentially we just need to check that we've not got anything untoward given that we've asked for some extra boost pressure. As you can see, it's made more power. Similar sort of torque in the mid-range because we've only asked for that extra boost pressure at the top to achieve a slightly higher peak figure. We don't really want to be increasing the boost pressure down at the bottom, as well as the ignition timing where it's in sort of peak cylinder pressure. So same again, we've got wide open throttle. We'll check that against the pedal position. Yeah, all looks good, so nothing's changed there as I expected. In terms of ignition advance and knock control, so we've pulled a little bit more timing out. Again, it's to be expected given that we're asking for more. 0.75 is literally nothing. 1.5, yeah, nothing to worry about. Maximum ignition pull there, from what I can see, is on all cylinders. When you get right to the top, it's pulling 0.225. Now, what you would probably find, this car is making nearly 700 wheel horsepower on the dyno. I absolutely guarantee when you drive that down the road and you can get better airflow to it, it will not pull that timing out. And as a result of that, you'll actually be making more power than what we're making on the dyno. I can't get it across enough to people that having the engine in the back of these and the fans at the front, even with extra cooling, it can be really, really difficult to get the inlet temperatures down to a manageable level. Whereas when you're driving down the road, the car is shaped and the side pods and all that sort of stuff is designed to get as much cool air to the intercoolers and the intake as humanly possible. When you're pushing it up against a fan, it's not really going to do the same thing. So to achieve the power that we have done at the boost pressure that we have done, is absolutely amazing. And as I say, driving down the road, it's probably making even more. Maximum timing pull there right at the top, as you can see, is 0.225, so nothing even close to where I would be worried. And what's really interesting is on this particular file, you can see the dip in the ignition advance there. So where it pulls out that 2.25, because we've not adjusted any knock control here. So essentially, if you went to put Morrison's fuel in this, it would just pull all that timing out and try and keep it as safe as possible. Not recommended, by the way. But because we've not adjusted any of the knock control from factory, it's essentially doing what it would do straight from factory. So in that respect, where it pulls that 2.25 out, you can actually see a dip in the ignition advance, and we're only getting 24 degrees of ignition when actually we were asking for more than that. On the file where it was making less boost pressure, it was adding more ignition time in to try and achieve the figure that we wanted. Now in this particular case, the car responds better at this point to a little bit of extra boost, and you can see that here. So if I just open up I'm going to take all these off so we don't overcomplicate it. Take that one off. So if I put the commanded boost pressure, where are you? Boost pressure commanded value and boost pressure actual value. As you can see, we've gone from 1.65 request. I actually requested 1.799 and we are making 1.773. So it's slightly below the requested. So in theory, if we get slightly colder charge temperatures, you'll probably find that it'll eke out just a little bit more boost, but you can see how nicely that sits there. And in the mid-range there, we're underneath it. In fact, we're underneath it all the way apart from where it hits boost. It overshoots slightly. It's probably controlling that with the wastegate, which is why you see a little spike in the dyno graph. And then it sits lovely all the way up there. So in reality, that car is about as far as I would want to take it. I think I've seen some people out there when I've logged cars pushing nearly 2 bar of boost pressure through these. With the hardware that's on that car, I wouldn't recommend it. I think that car, at nearly 700 wheel, it's pushing on for 800 horsepower. I really don't think that you need much more than that. And for every 100 millibar of boost as a risk level versus what you get in return, if that gains you 40 horsepower, on a 200 horsepower car, that's a great gain. On an 800 horsepower car, is it really something that you're going to feel? I wouldn't recommend pushing a car for the sake of making small incremental changes at this point. That car is perfectly happy with what we've done there. It pulls great on the road, it drives nice on the dyno, there's no untoward things in the data logs, we've got a really good graph. So as far as I'm concerned, that car can go back to the customer. Now that we've gone through the logs together, we are going to take the car out on the road for some road testing. This gives us an opportunity to test part throttle, part boost, all that sort of stuff. The early onset of boost, it's difficult to do that on the dyno because everything's done at wide open throttle. So it doesn't finish at the point where we come off the dyno with the power figures. There's then all the part throttle stuff and sorting out the drivability settings for the car before we deliver it back to the customer. It's difficult to explain just how much of a monster that car actually is. I'm almost certain that the videos aren't going to have done it justice. However, I'd like to thank you for watching the video and taking the time to go through and hopefully understand what we do when we're tuning one of these. If there's any questions, comments, either comment below or send us an email. If you're looking at having your Porsche tuned, obviously reach out to either myself or one of the team. We can discuss all the options with you. If it's specifically a turbo 992, you'll find a link to the product description in the description of this video below. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.